always wanted to do that, Max. I'm Alec Lewis.
That was actually a pretty good impression of it, though.
I've heard it a few times driving around the Twin Cities area. I'm Alec Lewis. I cover the Vikings for The Athletic, and I have the distinct honor of being in studio today with you, Max Fuller, producing here on the Bumper to Bumper program. I am an ink-stained wretch, even though I don't believe I've seen my stories in ink in multiple years. But no, I have a ton of respect for how Dan and Guardsy go about it on a day-to-day basis. So very much looking forward to being here. We've got a pretty awesome lineup of guests. Kevin Seifert of ESPN is going to be joining us probably from the TCO Performance Center in Eagan, where I skipped out on my day job today and let him bring the news of Vikings practice. Later, I believe Kevin will be around 4:30. We're going to do John Krasinski, who's back from an exotic location where he did a nice vacation, I believe, with his family. Going to talk to him a little bit about the not the Twins. We are not going to talk to John Krasinski about the Twins.
John, you're switching it up now these days.
Going back to the AP days, we're going to talk to John about the Timberwolves ownership adjustments that have been had over at Target Center. And then at 6 o'clock, one of the best in the business, Courtney Cronin, who works at a level that makes me wonder if there are multiple Courtney Cronins. She's going to join us at 6 o'clock. So fun show for you guys because we're in the throes of Vikings training camp and really not too far out from the Vikings opener against the Green Bay Packers. I want any Vikings questions that you, the listener, have. So you can send us those via text at 64686. I believe the talkbacks are available on the iHeart app. I don't know what I'm saying, but it sounds like something Nordo would say in the morning. And then you could also throw me any questions you have if you're on social media at Alec_Lewis. But my mind has been very invested in the Vikings 53-man roster and the quarterback situation and all of that. So any questions or topics that you are driving around or walking around or just listening to and curious about, please hit us with those on any one of those, opportunities, whether it's the text line, whether it's social media, what have you. So I thought, Max, to begin here.
Yeah.
I thought about going common man style. I mean, I'm working on stories. I had a call this morning with one of the Vikings players' parents. I talked to Bob Chesney, the UCLA football coach, and I'm busy. I'm trying to balance the preparation for this wonderful 3.5 hours that we're about to have. But there's not much time. So I'm like, I could just wing it. I mean, I come in the studio and Common tells me all the time that just do what I do. But unfortunately, I didn't go to Brown. I don't have an Ivy League education. So it's quite difficult to think that I can just hop in here and wing it the way that Common Man does. I mean, I was sitting in the room talking to somebody, as I told him beforehand, and he comes in between breaks and he's like, why don't you just talk about iced coffee with Max for the first 15 minutes? I'm like, that seems like that'd be quite difficult. I mean, you probably like iced coffee, Max.
Sure, but 15 minutes? I mean, but not everybody's a common man. It's like Larry Fitzgerald said the other day. He's like, I learned nothing from Randy Moss because I can't do what Randy Moss does. You can't learn anything from the common man because there's only one common man. You can't do what he does.
And then before we come on, he's like, well, you talk about ice. You talk about, how do you slurp it out of a straw? I'm like, that doesn't work for 15 minutes, but I really appreciate the offer there. So, no, I just don't want the anxiety of looking at the clock and seeing that I have 12 minutes until,
nothing worse.
The buzzer sounds and we could go to commercial. So we're not going to do that. So I weighed, there are a lot of places I could go for this first segment. Should I start with JJ McCarthy
right off the rip
and the Vikings backup quarterback situation and how people have strong opinions about it and what do we think about that? No, I'm not going to do that because we'll talk about him, I'm sure, over the course of this show. I thought to myself, there's Kyler Murray, there's the defense, there's Harrison Smith, the safety room, edge rusher, Vikings organization. What should I start with? And, I came to the point, Max, where I'm like, I should start with the thing that I think relates to the Vikings that has flown a little bit under the radar all off season.
Oh, okay.
And again, like we've talked about Kyler Murray. We've talked about the run game. It's not even that. I've said the run game is underrated for months now on this in terms of what they're going to do with the run game in 2026. We talked about the quarterback competition way too much. We've talked about the backup situation. And again, we're going to revisit that over the course of this show. But what about Kevin O'Connell?
Oh.
What about focusing for a second on the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings? Because I don't really believe that anybody's done it here locally in a way that is necessary for a guy who's entering his 5th season as this team's head coach. How about how important of a year this is for Kevin O'Connell? How about the opportunity that exists for Kevin O'Connell for him to punctuate the perceptions that have revolved around him for some time, for him to confirm or even build on how he's perceived throughout the league? And I will say this because I talk to a lot of people throughout the league. Kevin O'Connell has mad respect from a lot of executives, other coaches, for what he's built from a culture standpoint, for the, his offensive scheme. But to maintain that respect, to maintain the belief, to maintain the perceptions, as you've heard a million times, Max, it takes a year after year, week after week, day after day validation of what those are.
What have you done for me lately? Yes.
So I want to, rattle off a couple things. So Kevin O'Connell, I looked this up before the show. I did some research. I'm not winging it full go here. Kevin O'Connell through 4 seasons, 43 wins. That is the 5th most of any team in the NFL since he became the Vikings head coach. That's notable. That's regular season wins. Since 2022, when Kevin O'Connell took over, 1,544 points scored. Where do you think that ranks, Max?
It's got to be pretty high. I'm gonna say 5 again. 5.
14th. 14th.
Oh.
The offensive success rate for Kevin O'Connell since he became the Vikings head coach in 2022. What's your guess, Max?
Not even sure, dog.
14th.
14th again?
So there's a bunch of things and a bunch of probably avenues I could take here. I mean, there's one thing that's definitive and abundantly clear when you talk to anybody within the building or anybody outside of the building. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I spoke to parents of one of the Vikings players who will be on the 53-man roster this morning, and they raved for an extensive period of time about the culture within that building, about how much their son enjoys being a part of it, how much he relishes what they've kind of the resources that they've given these players internally. So I don't think there's any holes you can poke in the culture that has been created. I do think we've talked, Dan Barrero's talked on this program a lot about the run game, and really for 4 seasons, it's been below average to middling to last year was probably inching more and progressing more than it had in the 3 years prior, but it's still not been a top 10 run game. So that's something that needs to be discussed. I'd say the explosive ability of the offense has been there at times. There's no question they've been explosive through the passing game when they've had quarterback play that rises to a certain level. The system and the adaptability of the system, that's another conversation that I think is underneath the umbrella of the Kevin O'Connell discussion entirely. So Kevin O'Connell, here he is. He's entering his 5th season. Again, no playoff wins. The drafts that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the Vikings general manager, presided over the last 4 years is definitely a variable to all of it. But it becomes muddied by the fact that the coaching staff has had a lot of say in personnel decisions over those last 4 years. The quarterback injuries also play a part in just the overarching discussion. When you have Kirk Cousins tear his Achilles, when you have to turn it over to Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins and Jaron Hall,
right?
When J.J. McCarthy struggles like he did last year, and players like Max Brosmer have to play much earlier than the original intent was for them to play. Like that plays a role in it as well. And so does the fact that when the Vikings drafted J.J. McCarthy, he was the 5th quarterback taken in that draft, which is, if you were to do the history of the 5th quarterback taken in any draft, the success rate probably is not crazy high. But those situations are what they are. I mean, there's only so many variables, so much nuance, so much context you can add or provide to really create the full picture around Kevin O'Connell. And there's only so much blame to go around. I mean, when you are a leader of an organization, you are a leader both in the good and the bad. When things go really, really well, you rightfully receive the credit. When things don't go as well, you rightfully receive some portion of the blame. And so I think this season, when you have a new quarterback, when you have talked about the overhauled run game at nauseum, when you have a healthy Christian Darrisaw, when you're spending $172 million on the offense, which is sixth most of any team in the NFL, like the time is now. And I think the realistic expectations are warranted, which means whether it's winning a playoff game, whether it's just getting to a playoff, I think there's a reason to be realistic with the expectation. But hitting the high end of that realism should be the objective and the goal to evaluate Kevin O'Connell at his fullest. And so I just think so much conversation has been about the quarterbacks, has been about the roster and all of that. But taking stock of where Kevin O'Connell is at this point in his coaching career and in his time here in Minnesota, I think this season is going to be a major referendum on the perceptions of Kevin O'Connell. It's not to say his job is, there's pressure on that. I don't believe that's the case, but I do think from a how he is perceived standpoint, this season will have massive ramifications. And if it goes really well, he will receive an amount of praise that probably matches when he won Coach of the Year a couple of years ago. So that, for me, is a subject that I wanted to start out with. Better than iced coffee, I hope, Max. I'd be curious.
I mean, maybe if you're KOC, you might get a call during the commercial break like, hey, bro, you're making the spot hot for your boy right now.
Listen, I think it's a fair conversation to talk about the head coach of the NFL team in this place that hasn't won a playoff game since 2019. So really looking forward to the show. Hopefully you guys have thoughts on that. If you do, hit us on the text line 64686. We're going to have Kevin Seifert of ESPN at 4:30. John Krasinski talking Timberwolves, not Twins, at 5:30. Courtney Cronin of ESPN at 6. And it's going to be a blast of a show, as it always is, because I've got Max producing. You're listening to Bumper on KFAN. I'm Alec Lewis, and we will talk to you right after the break.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
This report is sponsored by Total Comfort, your trusted...
When the cameras go live, don't miss a moment. Get a front row seat to the Power Trip Morning Show. Program password, exclusive interviews, and more at KFAN.com/watch. Powered by Quantum Fiber Internet.
All right, welcome back to Bumper at about 3:17 p.m. I'm Alec Lewis in for Dan Barrero here on the Fan with Max Fuller producing. Max, it had been a while since we've done one of these together.
I know, it's been like
years,
dog. Yeah, I think I was here the first time you ever did this.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. And I'm as nervous now as I was then.
I don't know why you're on episode like 200 of your own show.
Yeah, dog? and I part of the reason I even did the podcast, the Alec Lewis Show, because was A, I'm a human, so you have to have a podcast.
You have to.
But B, was like, okay, after I did that first hosting for 3 hours, I probably need some reps of what it's like talking into a microphone with nobody listening. So I want to segue from that first conversation and go pretty in-depth here, Max, on some of the roster stuff. Because, again, as I said, I've been thinking about all of it at The Athletic. I did a 53-man roster projection here on Tuesday morning, which was pretty fun to do. But as Common Man is in the studio looking for something, I want to answer a question from the text line. If you got them, please hit us at 64686. Let's see here. The first question: does the O-line depth worry us? How have their struggles affected the quarterback situation? So, O-line depth probably is never the sexiest radio talker, but I do think it segues to something that I feel is really, really important with this entire team as a whole, Max, and that's just the depth of the overall roster in general. And I feel like so much of the draft picks in the last 4 years, you think about the flashes of the high-end picks and are they making splash plays? But it's so critical that some of these late-round draft picks become reliable depth. And on the offensive line, I really just start at center. Like Blake Brandel, over the course of this training camp, has definitely had trouble snapping the football. I would say from a protection standpoint and a run-blocking perspective, he's really been dialed in. But I do wonder if there is an injury, and Max, just like I do, they tend to happen on the offensive line.
Yeah.
And you have to turn it over to Michael Juergens, the former 7th-round pick from a few years ago out of Wake Forest. Like, that is a kind of dicey place to be. And then if you think about the interior, Donovan Jackson in his second year at left guard has looked really, really good in training camp. Will Fries at right guard, I feel like has really taken to their new run blocking style and what they want to accomplish. But even the depth behind those two guys, whether it's Joe Huber or Walter Rouse or whoever ends up making, the 53-man roster, you're expecting a lot out of those players. And so does the O-line depth worry you? I do. I think if you're into O-line depth, it's never a premium situation to be in. And then how have their struggles affected the quarterback situation? There's no question that J.J. McCarthy on Saturday against the Baltimore Ravens, some of the complication for him in the offense was the fact that the left tackle circumstance was not optimal for him. Henry Bird, who hadn't played a ton of tackle in the course of his professional career, was at left tackle going up against Mike Green, a really talented edge rusher, Zion Young, another rookie, really talented edge rusher. And Henry Bird had trouble, and that put pressure on J.J. McCarthy to make quick decisions and throw the ball accuracy. So O-line depth, that's the B block of the show, Max. Am I doing it right? What do you think about it?
I think so, because I think if you watch that game after J.J. McCarthy got out of the game, or before J.J. McCarthy got out of the game, because I know a lot of people might have, when started scrolling on Instagram after J.J. McCarthy wasn't under center anymore. But the offensive line, him and Carson Wentz were under duress. I would say more snaps than not.
Yeah.
So that definitely is something that I would see that's on the top of Vikings fans' minds right now.
There's just no question. Another question from the text line, 64686. This is the Ask Alec Anything Vikings roster mailbag portion of the equation. The question comes from, I believe, a 507 number. I don't know where that is. Max, you probably do. Have the Vikings lost the plot around tight end contributing to the offense this year? I think it's an interesting question because it really gets at the amount of skill talent that they have. You've got the exceptional receiver room that you know very well about, Max, and you, the listener, know very well about. With Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jawan Jennings, you're going to want those guys on the field a fair amount.
I think it's fair to put Miles Price and Ty Felton in those conversations now, too.
I talked to Ty Felton yesterday, and his megawatt smile made you want to include him as part of the fixture group. But then you have Max Bredesen, who they drafted at fullback, and the way they've incorporated some of their schematics over the course of training camp makes you believe, that they want to incorporate the fullback a fair amount throughout this 2026 season. Then you've got the running back position where you've got Damon Claiborne, the rookie, and his explosiveness behind Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. So there's a lot of talent. And then you get to tight end where it's TJ Hawkinson in a contract year for him, given the way his contract was adjusted. Josh Oliver, who remains the rugged run-blocking tight end who allows you to dictate to personnel. But then the depth behind those two, it raises another roster question of, in the event of an injury for TJ Hawkinson or Josh Oliver, then who you turning to? You're turning to Ben Jurasik? Are you turning to Gavin Bartholomew?
Right.
Do you have faith and trust in those guys? So have they lost a plot around tight end? I don't believe so. I do think TJ Hawkinson looked pretty good in training camp the last 2 weeks, looked pretty good in the joint practices, but how they utilize the overarching point I want to make is like how they utilize all of these skill players in a clarified and defined identity that makes sense week to week is one of my curiosities and fascinations that hits back on the first segment of if Kevin O'Connell and this offensive staff can really structure this thing in a clarified way, they deserve a hell of a lot of praise for the job that they've done in doing that. So, good question. The tight end depth is something that I've had my eyes on a little bit.
Speaking of a guy that you talked about, KOC might want to, get some of that respect back. TJ Hawkinson, a guy that was widely viewed as a top 10, if not top 5 tight end that people have kind of, there's whispers that he's fallen off. There's whispers of his demise. He's going to want to get his get back, especially in a contract year. And I know that the Vikings have really emphasized this increased role of the run game and this new zone running scheme. And you got to imagine that Josh Oliver is going to be a huge part of that from a blocking perspective.
Yeah, and TJ Hawkinson, look, like there have been a bunch of sequences in recent years where, since he's come back from the ACL injury, the brutal ACL injury suffered from Kirby Joseph, the safety for the Detroit Lions that probably isn't a KFAN listener favorite. And TJ Hawkins, there have been instances where in contested catch situations or from a separation ability, I do think some of the questions when you go back in the film and watch the film, they're warranted. But I would say two things with TJ Hawkinson. Like if you want to be an optimist about what's possible for TJ Hawkinson in 2026, I think the first thing you'd start off with is Kyler Murray in Arizona. Love throwing to the tight end. It's a big body. It allows him to put the ball, on a massive frame, especially in the red zone. Now, he worked with Trey McBride in Arizona, so that probably was a contributor to him utilizing the tight end a ton. But then the other, I think reason to be optimistic with TJ Hawkinson is just he's another year removed from that ACL injury and is motivated. Like, as much as these professional athletes say in interviews, like we don't hear the noise, you're not aware of it. Like they definitely, it seeps in. There's just no question. And so I do think TJ Hawkinson will be very motivated, with the 2026 season. Let's see here. Someone asked Alec, why is the whisper question guy now shouting into the microphone? Jordan from Maple Grove. That's what I do. Like when I'm out there interviewing players, I'm too embarrassed to yell at them probably because they're professional athletes. But then when I get here, I'm not embarrassed at all. You just can't be. But
no, you got to bring some energy to the mic, man.
Yeah, you got to. Another 507. Do you have an update on the
Mankato-ish?
Okay, and that's good to know. Like, and apologies go out to Mankato. I have reverence for what that town represents, I should say. But do you have an update on the J.J. McCarthy injury? Do we know what it is or how long he'll be out? There was no specification after the game from either Kevin O'Connell or J.J. McCarthy on what that distinct injury was. I will say, he took a beating in the pocket. We just talked about the offensive line performance in that Saturday game. But then J.J. McCarthy was out on the field Monday afternoon at practice. So, and then from all my expectations and understanding, today, J.J. McCarthy was back out there again, taking reps with the second team. So I think from a health standpoint, J.J. McCarthy is doing fine, has worked off that Saturday game, and we'll see if he plays Friday night in Denver against the Broncos. Very curious about it. So that hits on a few Vikings questions. We could Max, we've got like 30 texts on the 646.
The people got a lot of questions for you.
And I'm loving it. I could just riff on this for 3.5 hours and rename myself Common Man, and away we go. But hope you guys are enjoying this episode on Tuesday of the Bumper to Bumper program here on KFAN. I'm Alec Lewis in for Dan Barrero with Max Fuller producing, and more Vikings questions after the break.
On September 5th and Ron White October 17th. Get the complete details on all our upcoming shows on the concert page at KFAN.com. Keyword calendar.
The text line is hot, Max. The people are curious
right now.
Yeah, it's the place to be if you can be on the 64686 text line. I'm Alec Lewis in for Dan Barrero on the Fan. Max Fuller is producing. We haven't gotten to do this together in a while, and it was a fun first opportunity, and it's been fun so far this afternoon, at least for me. Let's see here, Max. First, a question from a 612 number. They want to know what we think about the new rivalry uniforms.
Oh,
did you see those today?
I thought they look sweet, man. I like, especially the little braid thing on the side or whatever that pattern is. I thought that was a nice little touch.
I thought the braid pattern, and there was some like lettering on the top that I really liked. Like, I saw a lot of the instant reaction on the colors and Raven style and all that stuff, but like, it's still purple.
Right. There's only so many shades of purple, dog. Like,
right.
You know, like, you can't be tripping about little stuff like that.
That's kind of what I feel the same way. But I will say, like, those retro throwbacks that they wear where it's like the lighter purple.
That one is sick.
That's just the best one.
For sure.
And I'm a big fan of, like, if you're rocking with something that looks phenomenal, just keep rolling with it.
Right.
I mean, maybe that's the Alabama Crimson Tide in me. I don't really know. But, like, that's just what it is. So,
no, I thought they looked sweet, man. So they're going to be wearing those against the Packers, Bears, Lions this year?
Yes, I believe that's the case. The rivalry uniforms should be pretty fun. Quick word from the Vikings, a statement from an NFL spokesperson. This is just some news to get out of the way. Minnesota's Ja'Shawn Jones was suspended for the first 3 games of the 2026 regular season without pay for violating the NFL's substance of abuse policy. Ja'Shawn Jones has been I'd say depth receiver for the Vikings here during this training camp. He's made a bunch of plays. We'll have to do some reporting between the breaks probably to assess or uncover what happened here. But definitely notable. He's really, in certain instances, he's performed during some of these training camp practices and preseason games, but something to note. And I would say I didn't expect Ja'Shawn Jones to make the active 53-man roster, Max. Thought the more likely under the radar candidate for that would have been Dylan Bell, the undrafted rookie from Georgia, but some news that just got in the inbox. So let's get back to the text line. Here we go. 612. Why can't people be patient with JJ McCarthy? He's only 23 years old and he's got a whole career ahead of him. So we went 35 minutes, Max, without diving deep into the JJ McCarthy conversation, but I feel like it's worthy of a little bit of elaboration here. So the way I've described this for people here is really, you got to look at it from a 2-prong perspective. The Vikings organization right now is in a short-term winning mindset. Now, that can be, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, why? Like, I can understand any arguments to that. But I'm just telling you, with what I understand after having a lot of conversations, they want to win now. The reasons for that, if you're wondering, are Kevin O'Connell's entering his 5th year not having won a playoff game. Justin Jefferson is 27 and in the prime of his career, not having won a playoff game. And the organization itself hasn't won a playoff game since 2019 with an ownership group that wants to be in it every single year. And so those forces push this organization into being in this short-term oriented mindset. So that's one prong of it. The other prong is exactly what 612 guy is saying, that JJ McCarthy, who is 23 years old, needs a lengthier runway for development, which is understandable for a guy who's only played 10 games in his NFL career, for a guy who didn't throw an extensive amount in college at Michigan. All of those forces lead the JJ McCarthy part of it all to where he does need runway and time for development. It's just hard to square those two at the same time. How can this team and organization in a short-term oriented mode also put every egg in their basket in the development of JJ McCarthy for the long term? Those puzzles just don't fit. And so that's why I will say, Max, it's been as uncomfortable. There's been this discomfort of how this is all played out going back to the spring when Kyler Murray was brought in and Carson Wentz was brought back. And so that's why, like, I get the lens on all sides. If you're we want Justin Jefferson to win right now type of person, I get it. If you're a JJ McCarthy needs the development, so he should be playing type of person, I get it. But it's also, the NFL is not like Major League Baseball, where you get time to AA to make mistakes or to strike out or to struggle as a pitcher for months on end. The NFL just doesn't work that way. And so that's really why, on a bigger picture level, quarterback development in the NFL is really hard. It's just a really hard thing to ask for. That's why some of the quarterbacks who have had success, like a Bo Nix, they played a ton in college. A Dak Prescott, they played a ton in college to where they had that runway. In Green Bay, they had the fortune of allowing a player who needed development, like Jordan Love, to sit for 3 years. Right. He was okay with it. The organization was okay with it. And so it all kind of melded together and worked in an optimal way. It's really hard to arrive at that place with where the Vikings are currently at. Does that make sense, Max?
Yeah.
Like as a premise?
I think that makes a ton of sense, because if this was Madden and this was JJ McCarthy's career mode, yeah, you could take a couple seasons, develop him, get his stats up and whatnot, but this is real life. There's a bunch of different pieces working at the same exact time, and what might be best for JJ is not necessarily best for the team, and especially best for the team when they're in this short-term winning mode, because you do have a guy like Justin Jefferson. You got a guy like KOC whose seat might not be hot, but it's at least a little lukewarm. You know what I'm saying? It could be getting warmer, you know?
Like, and that's where, with the KOC conversation to begin, like, it's not to say if they don't win a playoff game this year, it's do or die. It's not to say that. It's just a high spotlight, I would say, just the importance of what this year represents for him. But there's no, you said the right thing, Max. Like, there's just, it's hard to do what's right for all parties involved in a way that is this threaded needle of a path that makes a ton of sense. And I'm very empathetic to JJ and where he is in his career. Some might not think that. Like, I do my podcast and I see the comments because I'm human as well. But, like, I am very empathetic to a guy who didn't throw a ton at Michigan, arrives needing development because he was an overstrider with his mechanics. He threw a ton of fastballs and needed to be able to dial it down from a touch perspective. I think the arc of it somewhat gets lost. Of he had a great start to training camp his rookie season, performed well against the Raiders in that preseason game, and then the torn meniscus just throws an entire wrench in what the developmental curve was planned to be. And so I am empathetic to that, to just that path, I would say, Max. And so it's tough. It's tough. Like, and I've talked to people throughout the league, Max, who have that perspective as well. They're like, it's tough for JJ McCarthy. Like, it is, but they also understand the nature of a business that is so short-term oriented and winning focus. So that's, you know, I knew we were going to go on a 5-minute JJ McCarthy conversation at some point in this show.
Bound to happen.
But that,
it'll come up again.
Yes, that does it. The next question comes from, this was a good one on the cornerback safety from 612 guy. What does our cornerback safety roster look like after Jamal Adams' injury and most likely no Harry Hitman? Everyone is talking about the D-line and the linebacking core. So first and foremost, the most likely no Harry the Hitman, I wouldn't say that's most likely. I would say right now, Harry the Hitman and his future remains squarely undecided. There's no likely or unlikely. It is squarely in the middle of he could return, he could be done. That's my understanding of where Harrison Smith's situation lies. But as far as the cornerback and safety roster in the aftermath of Jamal Adams' injury, it's a really good question, because Jamal Adams, for as much as he was 31 years old and as much as he hasn't in recent years had the all-pro caliber of play that he did early in his career, Jamal Adams was definitely, absolutely, wholeheartedly carving out a significant defensive role for this team, because he can play near the line of scrimmage, and that allowed the Vikings defensive staff to have the flexibility for guys like Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson, Jay Ward to play on the back end. And so they really view that as a path for their defense. The injury to Jamal Adams was brutal. It was miserable to see in real time. I was in New Jersey at MetLife Stadium watching that with my binoculars, and you could just see just the toll that it was taking on his teammates. So it does leave the back end of this roster a question right now. Fortunately, they've had an undrafted rookie in Jacob Thomas from James Madison, who initially was a walk-on under Kurt Cignetti. He's really progressed. And they have a lot of belief in him internally and what he's shown them throughout training camp, but he's still an undrafted rookie. The 3rd-round pick, Jacoby Thomas from Miami, has definitely progressed. From a health perspective, the back stiffness seems like it's behind him. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he plays extensively Friday night so that the team can get a pretty good look at him. And then you're relying a lot on Josh Metellus, Jay Ward, and Theo Jackson potentially, who hasn't practiced in the last couple of days with an injury. So the safety room is, I would say defensively right now, besides edge rusher depth, the safety room is power ranking right at the top there for me as far as questions. And maybe Harrison Smith, the bat signals thrown up there in the sky over US Bank Stadium, and 22 arrives under the cover of darkness at some point. And I from my understanding, Max, like there's no deadline on that. If Harrison Smith decides next week he's got the bug and he's ready to roll, then maybe he shows up at TCO Performance Center. If it's week 1, week 2, week 3, and maybe the bug bites him then, like that's not going to surprise me either. So the safety room for me, I'm glad 612 guy asked the question, because it is a position group right now that warrants and deserves some dissection and some analysis, just because it's such a critical role in Brian Flores' defense. So good question there. We can talk about the cornerbacks a little bit when we come back from the break here. But you're listening to the Bumper to Bumper program here on KFAN. I'm Alec Lewis of The Athletic. Max Fuller is
yes,
hopefully nodding at my jokes or at my at my very hardcore analysis here. But it's been fun. If you've got Vikings questions, toss them at us on the text line 64686. You're listening to KFAN.
From the 1-800 Ask